We continue now at the top of Daf Chavdaladam and Meseches Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 24b. This Daf is sponsored by Yoni Zigdansky in memory of Peretz Yisrael ben Yoel Meir. May his neshama have an aliyah. On the previous Amud, Levi had said that when it comes to the Trumas Hadeshin, if a Zar does the Trumas Hadeshin, he's Chayiv Misa. So the Gemara now asked, or the Gemara in the previous Amud asked, why don't we make a Klal Uprat? And on the contrary, we should say it's only Avodas Matana, only an Avoda where you're giving something, putting something on the Mizbeach is a Zar Chayiv Misa. But by Trumas Hadeshin, where you're removing the ashes from the Mizbeach, there maybe we should say a Zar is not Chayiv Misa. So the Gemara now answers, Ulami Beis La Paroches Vavaditem, because the Pasuk says, Ulami Beis La Paroches Vavaditem, and we darshan as follows. El mi beis la paroches hu davodas matana v'lo avodas siluk. Inside, from within the paroches, that's where we say that you're only chayiv, a zar is only chayiv misa, if it's an avodas matana, not if it's an avoda of removing something. Ha-bachutz, but if you're outside that area, meaning by the actual mizbeach, outside of the heichal, afilu avodas siluk. Levi understands, even an avoda of siluk, even an avoda of removal, like the Trumas Hadeshin, so in that case, the zar is going to be chayiv. Rashi over here explains, ulami beis la paroches ifsik ben klala leprata. The phrase ulami beis la paroches, it interrupts between the klal and the prat. Again, the suggestion was we should have a klal prat, but there's a phrase that interrupts. Mi beis la paroches hu davodas matana. So we learn as follows. From within the paroches, meaning in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so there it's got to be avodas matana. Kagon hazos sheben habadim di Yom HaKippurim, the sprinklings that take place on Yom Kippur, unesinas ketoras alo eish, you put the ketoras on the fire also, part of that avoda. V'lo avodas siluk, but not removal avodos in the Kodesh Kadashim. Kagon hotzas kafu machta, shakoin gadol machna sham lektoras Yom HaKippurim, umanichan bein habadim v'yachar kach chozer motzian. Koin gadol would place the ketoras in the Kodesh Kadashim on Yom Kippur, and then he would remove it. The removal, that would not count. If a zar did that, he would not be chayiv misa. Just take a look at the pasuk over here. Again, the klal uprat was supposed to be l'chol devar hamizbeach, so that's the klal for all devar hamizbeach. The interruption is ulmi beis la paroches va'avaditam. That's the interrupting phrase, and then the prat was avodas matana. So what we're saying is avodas matana. If it's within the kodesh kodashim, then it has to be avodas matana. Then we make the klal prat and say only avodas matana and not avodas siluk. But outside, meaning by the mizbeach, outside of the hechel, there we don't make the klal prat. There, even in avodas siluk, the zar is going to be chayiv. And so the Gemara says, ihachi, if so, if you're going to say that ulami beis la paroches vavadatam is an interruption, so vavadatam nami, elmi beis la paroches hu davoda tama v'lo avoda sheyesh achara avoda. We learned out from vavadatam that it has to be an avoda tama. The only thing a zar is chayiv misan is if it's the concluding avoda. But if it's an avoda where there's an avoda that follows, then the zar is not chayiv misa. But let's make the same exact drasha. Let's say ulami beis la paroches vavadatam. The halacha of avoda tama only applies in the Kodesh Kadashim. It only applies ulami beis la paroches. That's what the Gemara over here means. The Gemara says only mi beis la paroches hu davoda tama v'lo avoda sheyesh achara avoda. Maybe only mi beis la paroches. Only in the Kodesh Kadashim do we say it's got to be an avoda tama and not an avoda that has an avoda that follows it. Habachutz, but outside of the heichel, afilu avoda sheyesh achara avoda. Even if you have an avoda where there's an avoda which follows, for example, yeshrita, kabbalah, holacha, all of those, there are avodas that follow. You have to do the sprinkling of the blood following the shrita and the kabbalah, etc. So maybe we should say that if you're outside the heichel, even those you're going to be chayiv. If you're a zar, you'll be chayiv misa. So to that the Gemara answers va'avadatem hadar arvekra. The vav in the word va'avadatem, that actually means to say even outside of the heichal, this halacha still applies. It has to be an avoda tama. Rashi over here says va'avadatem hadar arve le'inyan avoda tama. In terms of the halacha of avoda tama, which we learned from avadatem, shehavav mosif le'inyan rishon. The vav adds. The vav is like an inclusion and says in such a situation it applies all the time. It's got to be avoda tama, whether you're in the kodesh kodashim, whether you're outside of the heichal. Aval avodas matana lo mahader ela ami beis la paroches de la kamei de lo ksiv bei vav. When it comes to avodas matana, there's no vav. And therefore we say the halacha of avodas matana only applies in the Kodesh Kodashim, does not apply outside of the heichel. So the Gemara now asks, boy, Rava asks the following question. Avoda siluk beheichol mahu. What about if you have an avoda siluk? It's not in the Kodesh Kodashim, but it's not outside the heichel either. Like, for example, you have an avoda siluk, an avoda of removal in the heichel itself, but not in the Kodesh Kodashim, in what we call the Kodesh. Rashi says, avoda siluk beheichol v'hi avoda tama. Let's say it's an avoda tama. It's a concluding avoda. Kagon, for example, dishun mizbeach hapnimi. They'd have to clear the ashes off the inner mizbeach. V'ha menorah, or let's say the clearing, the siluk by the menorah, they have to clear the ashes. Levi ma. What would Levi say in that case? So do we say that that's the same as the Kodesh Kodashim, in which case we are going to make the drasha and say that Avodah Siluk you're not Chayiv Misa? Or do we say no, that's like Bachutz, and therefore even in Avodah Siluk you'd be Chayiv Misa? What's that going to be? So again, Avodah Siluk Behechol ma. What's the halacha of Avodah Siluk Behechol? Lifnim midamin lei. Is that the same as Lifnim, meaning in the Kodesh Kodashim? Or Lachutz midamin lei? Or is that the same as doing it Lachutz, meaning outside of the Hechol? Hadar Pashin, and afterwards they answer this question, mi base ula mi base. We learn it out from mi base ula mi base. Rashi over here says mi base la paroches havale lemichtav. It could have just said mi base la paroches. Uchsiv ula mi base la paroches. It says ula mi base, so it adds there the letter lamid. So therefore we learn out, it adds there the vav and the lamid. So there we learn out lasos hechol kebase kodshei kodashim. Therefore we understand that that's an inclusion, that the hechol itself is the same as the kodshei kodashim upater al avodah siluk, and therefore the zar is going to be pater al avodah siluk in the hechol in the same way he's pater in the kodesh kodashim. So the Gemara now asks, Ela me'ata, but according to this entire drasha, Rashi over here says, Ela me'ata davodas matana mechayiv behechol zar demarbe ulami base. Right now what we're saying is that in avodas matana, if it's not an avodas siluk, if it's an avodas matana in the hechol, a zar is actually going to be chayiv misa. So now we should ask the following question. Zar shesider es ha-shulchan. Let's say a zar arranges the shulchan, meaning he arranges the lechem aponim and the shulchan. L'chayiv, he should be chayiv for doing an avod in the Beis HaMikdash. He should be chayiv misa. Rashi says, Zor shesider lechem l'chayiv misa. V'amay amrin al dalid avodos v'sulo. On the previous summit, it said it only identified 4 avodos that the Zor is chayiv misa. And that was the whole idea. We identify 4, and then Levi adds on and says, oh, it's true by the Trumas Hadeshen as well, but only 4. So what about, we have other examples of things that the Zor should be chayiv misa. For example, let us say that a Zor should be chayiv misa for arranging the lechem aponim on the shulchan. So the Gemara says, no, that's not an avodah tama. Iko sidor bazichin, because still after you put the bread on, you also have to put the bazichin, which contain the frankincense, which contain the levona, that also needs to go on the shulchan. So the Gemara says, fine, sidor bazichin l'chayiv. Once you arrange the bazichin, that should be the concluding avodah. You should be chayiv in that case. Gemara says, no, iko siluk v'haktara, because you still have to remove the bazichin, and you got to burn the frankincense. Rashi over here says, iko sidor bazichin. Again, you got to arrange the bazichin basrei kedichsiv. Right after you do the lechem, you do the bazichin, like it says, v'nasata ala mareches levona zaka v'lav avodah tami. You got to put the frankincense there. That's the sidor bazichin. So it's not an avodah tama to put the lechem. So the Gemara says, iko siluk v'haktara, and even after the bazichin, you got to remove them. Adayin lo nigmara avodas at Shabbos haba, meaning the next week you're going to remove that. Sheisal keda v'yakter bazichin. That's when you're going to burn the frankincense. So the avodah is still not complete, and that's why the zar is not chayiv for doing that as well. And the Gemara asks further, zar shesider as ha-menorah l'chayiv. Let's say the zar arranges the menorah. He should also be chayiv misa. Rashi says, shesider as ha-menorah baboker hayu mesalken as ha-neiros. In the morning they would remove the neiros shel zav of gold, min ha-menorah, from the menorah, lekaneach afar and yof, in order to wipe off the ashes properly. The chozron v'kovano samba, then they would place those neiros back in the menorah. V'arei avodah tama. That's an avodah tama. So again, if a zar is chayiv for doing the avodah inside the hechel, what about in that situation where siddur as menorah l'chayiv, he should be chayiv? So the Gemara says again, iko nesinas psila. Still, there's another step you got to put in the wick, and therefore it's not an avodah tama. Gemara says nasan psila l'chayiv. Fine. When he puts in the psila, when he puts in the wick, he should be chayiv. Iko nesinas shemen. The Gemara says that's not complete either. You have to put in the oil. Nasan shemen l'chayiv. When he puts in the oil, he should be chayiv. Gemara says iko hadlaka. You still have to light the candles. So hidlik l'chayiv. The Gemara says when he lights the candles, he should be chayiv. Gemara answers hadlaka lav avodahi. Hadlaka is not considered an avoda. Therefore, the zar is not chayiv misa for doing hadlaka. And so the Gemara says, "V'lo, is it really true that hadlaka is not considered an avoda?" For Tanya, but we learned in a brayso, "V'nosnu b'nei Aaron hakohen eish al mizbeach v'yorchu eitzim alo eish." It says that the kohanim, they put the fire on the mizbeach. Limeid al hatzosas alisa. This teaches us that when you burn the wood chips that you put on the mizbeach, shalote ela bekohen kosher v'chlishares. It has to be done with a kohen who's kosher to do the avoda. Has to be done with klishares, and so therefore you see hadlaka is an avoda. Rashi over here says, hatzosas alisa, hatzosas kismim dakim. That's the small wood chips that they would light. Im hutzrach lahatzas al mizbeach ba'achas min ha'marochos kagon shekirva ma'arocha lichlos shenisrfa kol ha'medur. Let's say a certain fire on the mizbeach was going out, they would use these wood chips to light the fire. Uvechlisharis, it has to be done in klisharis. What does that mean? Shei lovish bigdei kahuna arba. He's got to wear the 4 begadim im kohen hedyot. If he's a kohen hedyot, if he's kohen gadol shmona, if he's a kohen gadol, he has to wear all 8 begadim. Sharei nemar kan hakohanim v'chol makom shenemar b'nei Aaron hakohanim b'chuhuna mashma b'vigdei kunasim. It has to be b'bigdei kuna. In any case, again, you see from here that hadlaka is considered an avoda, and so the Gemara answers hatzosas aliso avoda. He lighting the wood chips that go on the mizbeach, that is an avoda. But hadlaka lav avoda, but stam to do the hadlaka of the menorah, that's not considered an avoda. And the Gemara continues ela me'ata, but again, according to all of this, zor shesider as hamarocha lechayev. Let's say a zor arranges the wood on the mizbeach, he should be chayev for that. He should be chayev misa. Gemara says, no, when it comes to arranging the wood on the Mizbeach, there was another step that they would do after. They would arrange these 2 logs of wood on the Mizbeach. So again, it's not an avoda tam, it's not a final avoda. Gemara says, Sidr Shnei Gezir and L'chayev. Okay, so when you arrange the 2 logs, you should be chayev for that. Gemara says, no, Ika Sidr Eivarim, you're going to put the limbs on the Mizbeach. So again, it's not an avoda tam. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Amar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. But didn't Ravasi say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Zor shesider shnei gezirei etzem chayiv? On the contrary, if a Zor arranges the 2 logs of wood on the mizbeach, he is chayiv misa. So you see, it is considered an avoda tama. So the Gemara says that's exactly the machlokas. Baha pligi, that's exactly the machlokas. Mar savar avoda tama. He one says it is an avoda tama. It's the last avoda. Umar savar lav avoda tama. The other one says it is not considered avoda tama. It's not considered the final avoda. Rashi over here says, first of all, Iko basrei sidr shnei gezirin di alfinalum lekamon mikrai. We're going to learn about the shnei gezirin later on. Iko sidr evarim. There's the arrangement of the limbs to tamid basrei. You put the limbs of the korban tamid after. V'chol zeh me'avodas hasidru. That's all part of the arranging of the mizbeach. And the Gemara says, Baha pligi Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. This is exactly the machlokas Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan savar sidr shnei gezirin avoda tamahi shesidor ma'areches eitzim tama v'gomeres hiba. When you put the 2 gezirin on there, that's the final arrangement of the wood. V'sidor ha'evarim tchilas sidor acheru. According to the first opinion, according to Rabbi Yochanan, putting on the limbs is the beginning of a new avoda, a new arrangement. The Rav savar, but Rav holds lav avoda tama. It's not an avoda tama. The shem sidor echad, who all arranging is all part of the same category, and therefore the limbs is the conclusion of that avoda. The Gemara continues, Tanya kavase de Rav, Tanya kavase de Levi. We have a brisa like Rav, and we have a brisa that supports Levi. Tanya kavase de Rav, we have a brisa that supports Rav as follows. Avodos shazor chayiv alei misa. The following avodos, if a non-Kohen does them, he's chayiv misa. Zrikas dam bein lifnim bein lifnai v'lifnim. When you do the throwing or the sprinkling of the blood, whether inside the heichal or whether in the kodesh kadashim. V'hamaza b'chatas ha'of, one who sprinkles the blood of a chatas ha'of. V'hamamatza v'hamakter b'olas ha'of, one who squeezes the blood and one who burns the olas ha'of. V'hamanasech shlosha lugin mayim, a person who does the water libation on Sukkos, u'shlosha lugin yayin, and somebody who does the wine libation throughout the year. Rashi over here says, first of all, zrikas dam hamizbeach b'chutz, the sprinkling of the blood on the outer mizbeach. Bein lifnim, that's hazosh ala paroches, that refers to sprinklings of the blood within the heichal on the paroches, the curtain that separated the kodesh from the kodesh kadashim. Bein lifnai v'lifnim shal bein habadim diyom kippurim, that refers to the sprinkling that takes place by the Aron on Yom Kippur in the Kodesh Kadashim. B'chatas ha'of ksiv hazah v'hiza midam hachatas al kira mizbeach. By the chatas ha'of, there's also a sprinkling on the mizbeach. Ba'olas ha'of, when it comes to the carbon ola of a bird, ksiv mitzui umalak esrosh, you squeeze the blood, v'hikter ha-mizbeach, and then you burn on the mizbeach. V'nimsa damo al kira mizbeach, you also put the blood on the wall of the mizbeach. V'hamaktir sha'ola kolol, you burn the entire carbon ola. V'amenasech shloshas lugan shipachos shebenesachim revi'is ahin lakeves v'ilu trumas hadeshen lo katani v'hainu karav. First Rashi explains again what the menasech shloshas lugan is referring to, again the libations, and then Rashi says, why is this like Rav? Because you don't see trumas hadeshen in this brisa, so it appears that when it comes to trumas hadeshen, Azar is not chayiv misa for doing the trumas hadeshen. And the Gemara continues, Tanya kavase de Levi, we have a brisa like Levi. Avodos shazar chayiv alei and misa. The following avodos azar is chayiv misa. Hamerim is hadeshen. If he does the trumas hadeshen, that's the support for Levi, that azar is chayiv misa and the trumas hadeshen. V'sheva hazosh shebifnim, the 7 sprinklings that take place inside the Beis Hamikdash. V'sheva mitzora, and the sprinklings of the mitzora. V'hamala al gavei hamizbeach, somebody who puts on the mizbeach bein davar kosher, bein davar pasul, whether it's something kosher, whether it's something pasul. Rashi over here explains, bein davar pasul b'hanoch psulin shepsulan bakodesh. We're talking about things where the psul took place in the kodesh. Dim olu lo yardu, things which you put on the mizbeach, you're not supposed to take down. In other words, you leave them on the mizbeach. Those kind of psulin, mishum hachi chashiva haktara. Once it's alu v'lo yardu, once it goes in the mizbeach and we say it should stay there, that's considered a haktara, and that's why the zar is chayiv misa for doing it. And the Gemara continues. We'll take a look at the Bach over here. The Bach puts in the word arba paisos hayusham. Quoting the Mishnah, there were 4 separate lotteries that were done in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara asks, Lama Mafisen, why did they do the lottery? Gemara says, Lama Mafisen, why did they do the lottery? Kida Amron, it already says in the Mishnah. As Rashi over here says, Kida Amron, shall you boimli de machlokas. Otherwise, there's going to be a machlokas who's going to serve. So that's why they had to do the lotteries for who does the service in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara explains, Lama Mafisen v'chozer Mafisen. Question of the Gemara is, why do they do a lottery and then do another lottery? Why not just do one time? Rashi over here says, Lama nesofin lefayis arboa pam b'yom. Why do they gather 4 different times during the day for the lottery? Kedetanan b'masnisin, like it says in the Mishnah, yafisu al kulan ba'asifa rishona. They should do one gathering and do lotteries for everything. Mi yizke lazeh, mi lazu. Figure out who's going to do this avoda, who's going to do that avoda. Why do you have to regather everyone? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Kadesh lahargish kol azara. You want to make a commotion in the azara. On the contrary, we actually want to regather everyone. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Asher yachtav namtik sod beveis elokim nahalech beragesh. That's the idea over here. You have a commotion beveis elokim. We actually want to do that. Rashi over here explains, lahargish lashmiya kol hamon amrov. We want it to be like there's a lot of people making noise. Kam and many times during the day. Shu kavod lamelech. That's actually an honor for the king. It's an honor for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, beveis elokim v'gomer. It's something that we want to do. We want to gather everyone multiple times for the lotteries. And the Gemara continues, Bamem afisin. What did they wear when they did these lotteries? Rashi over here says, Ma'ayu lov shenosam hanesaf in lefayis, bigdei chol or bigdei kodesh. Did they wear bigdei chol when they did the lottery, or did they wear bigdei kodesh when they did the lottery? So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Amar bevigdei chol, Rav Sheshes Amar bevigdei kodesh. It's a machlokas. Rav Nachman says they wore bigdei chol, and Rav Sheshes says they wore bigdei kodesh. Rashi over here says, bevigdei chol v'hazochel avoda poshit v'lovish bigdei kodesh. Whoever merited to do the avoda would take off the bigdei chol and put on the bigdei kodesh. So that's a machlokas amoraim, Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman Amar bevigdei chol. Rav Nachman says they did it in bigdei chol. The Amr bevigdei kodesh, because if you're going to say they should do it in bigdei kodesh, iko bali zroos to chamsi ve'avdi. The strong kohanim, even though they don't win the lottery, they're already in bigdei kodesh. They're just going to jump and take their turn to do the avoda. They'll steal the avoda from the person who really won it. Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes says bevigdei kodesh. No, they do it in bigdei kodesh. The Amr bevigdei chol, because if they did the lottery in bigdei chol, agav chavivuse mikru v'avdi, because the avoda is so beloved, we're afraid they're actually going to accidentally do the avoda in bigdei chol, meaning those who win the lottery, they're not even in the bigdei kodesh yet. They might be so eager to do the avoda, they're going to do it in the bigdei chol. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Mino amin Allah. Where can I prove to you again my position that they did the lottery b'bigdei chol? And Rav Nachman says, D'Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah Meseches Talmud, Misarun lechazonim. They would give them over to the appointees in the Beis Hamikdash, those who serve the shamoshim in the Beis Hamikdash. V'hayu mafshitin osanas bigdei, and they would remove their clothing. V'lo hayu manichin alein. They wouldn't leave on them ela mechnasayim bilvad, only the mechnasayim. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chafei Amud Aleph.